Afternoon again. We're delighted to be joined by the permanent representative of Canada to the United Nations, Marc-André Blanchard, who is here in his capacity as the chair of the ad hoc advisory group on Haiti of ECOSOC, and he's here to brief you on the trip to Haiti the group recently took. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
So thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Thank you for having me. I had the privilege and the pleasure of being in Haiti for a visit on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week with a group of 15 representatives from the advisory group. The group is composed of 17 member states. Out of the 17, 15 were present in the delegation, and most at the ambassadorial level. It just shows the interest of the international community in the recent development of Haiti and the future of Haiti. And we met with obviously the special representative of the Secretary General, and also Madame Honoré and our deputies, Mr. Ben Lamli and Madame Page. And then we met with 18 agencies of the UN. We also met with the representatives of the private sector, the Chamber of Commerce. We've met with, we went to Croix des Bouquets to have a really direct experience with an agricultural production in one of the plains. We went to another industrial conglomerate in Port-au-Prince, where we also saw some interesting development. And we had a meeting with the president of the La Chambre des Députés, a vice president of the Senate, and members of both houses, the deputy and senators. We also met with the prime minister and the president and many of the ministers. If I have, obviously we will present our report shortly, but if you ask me what are the three salient features, or the three main points that I would say at this point are that there's really Haiti is now has a government, a president that has been elected, a government that has been put in place and it seems to be functioning, and that actually they have priorities that are very interesting and aligned with the Agenda 2030. So there's an opportunity for action in Haiti at the moment, and that's the first thing that I would say this afternoon. The second one is that the situation remains precarious and also urgent. There's an urgence d'agir, and it's urgent to act. And the third point is that actually, if we move from more of a humanitarian focus to more of a development focus, the leadership of this, the coordination of this development belongs to the government of Haiti. And we should make sure that the international community and the UN comes in support of this government, and that actually we collaborate and work very closely and with this government to ensure that actually the government succeeds with some of the priorities that it has. For example, the priorities of the government on one hand are with respect to l'état de droit, public security, democratic rights, modernization of the states, and on the other hand, they have economic objectives that are very clear in terms of agriculture, tourism, infrastructure, and services. And if you just look at hear what I just said, a lot of it is aligned. All of it is aligned with the Agenda 2030 and with the SDGs. And this is why I believe that there's an opportunity at the moment in Haiti. We have a new government that is credible and that has received the support of the people. And we have a plan by this government that is aligned with the Agenda 2030. And I think it's actually now there's alignment of not all of the planets, but a lot of the planets. And I think we should. This is now the time is not to. The time is now for the international community to continue to be interested and support the development of Haiti. This is not a time to just go away from Haiti. This is a time, I think it is an opportunity to make a difference with the people of Haiti and its government.
Thank you very much, sir. Melissa?
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup,
Merci.
Ambassador Blanchard, for coming here to speak to us today. I'd like to ask you, on your trip, you said that you met Madame Honoré. I would like to ask you about MINUSTA. We know that it's closing by October, and obviously it's leaving behind a controversial legacy, cholera, allegations of sexual abuse, as well as children in some cases. I'd like to ask you, what is your assessment of MINUSTA's legacy? Canada was heavily involved in the mission. And as a follow-up question, what is Canada doing to address paternity claims against peacekeepers?
So I'll answer. I think the legacy of MINUSTA is overall positive. That's what I think it is. I think all of the observers, we didn't hear from one person in Haiti and all of that we've heard more concern about MINUSTA, the nature of the missions changing than actually criticism of MINUSTA. MINUSTA was there in a very difficult period and actually was able to achieve a lot. Everybody agrees that the country is more in a better situation now than it was 5 years ago. Also, everybody agrees that the country is more secure now than it was a few years ago. So it's not perfect. There's still some security issues. There's many issues with the institutions, still issues of corruption and the likes. But this is why MINUJUST now transitioning to a focus on the rule of law and governance and institutions is the right one for a future involvement of the UN. And what it will mean for the UN in many ways, I really believe we, as an institution, this is a very good example where we need to change now the focus of our action in Haiti to a certain extent. We keep some of the focus will need to remain as is, but also we need to add a bigger component of development, of economic and social development, but we need to work at it with the government of Haiti. As with respect to the situation of the sexual exploitation and abuse that you referred to, the government of Canada is taking this very seriously. It has actually been troubled by allegations and some findings, and we're doing everything we can to actually meet our obligations. And for example, we've appointed a focal point, as recommended by the Secretary General in the Ministry of Justice, to channel the request for assistance for the victims of sexual exploitation and acts.
Can I have one follow-up? Sorry.
Yeah.
I would be remiss. I'm getting requests from back home. If I did not ask you about reports coming out this morning that Canada's announcement of its peacekeeping deployment may now be delayed until the fall. Et si je peux avoir une réponse en anglais et en français, j'apprécierais.
Well, you know that the government of Canada is taking very seriously. It's the decision is a very important one to how and where and what we will be doing in our contribution to the peacekeeping operations of the United Nations. It is a very important decision for our country. It is a very long-term decision. So we're doing everything we can to actually make sure that we make the right decisions and that we assess all of the facts needed to make that decision very carefully before we take it. Vous savez que ça me fait plaisir dans ma langue maternelle, c'est encore. Alors, la décision de contribuer aux forces de maintien de la paix des Nations Unies est une décision importante pour le Canada et c'est une décision qui doit être prise de façon en ayant exploré toutes les avenues, tous les faits, en ayant fait les analyses nécessaires et c'est quelque chose qui prend du temps parce que c'est pas un engagement à court terme que cette participation aux forces des maintiens de la paix, c'est un engagement qui se fait pour de nombreuses années. Et c'est pour cette raison-là que le gouvernement doit prendre le temps qu'il faut pour analyser en profondeur chacune des alternatives qui s'offrent à nous.
Carol, then Matthew, then Rob.
Ambassador, I wanted to ask you about the cholera fund for Haiti. Canada has contributed to it, but very few countries have. Is the fund dead? Do you have any ideas how you can come up with $400 million? I mean, where is this initiative going?
So I know that we'll have a report in a few weeks, I think, from the Secretary General and from the Deputy Secretary General on this issue. I know that the United Nations is still committed to this answer to the cholera situation in Haiti. And Canada has been committed to it as well, and we believe as a country that the international community should fulfill its obligation with respect to its responsibility faced to the situation of cholera in Haiti. Canada has contributed since 2010, more than $50 million to actually assist the Haitian in dealing with this very tough situation.
Can I just follow up? One of the proposals on the cholera fund was that the money that would be saved from shutting down MINUSTA could be shifted to that fund. Is that something you think that's feasible?
I will not speculate on this. I think we should all wait for the work being done. I know that Amina Mohamed is doing some work on this issue as we speak in terms of what's the next step in the question on this issue of cholera and the two tracks that were identified by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and the team of David Nabarro in the fall. And I think before we speculate on this, I would like to wait for the report that will be submitted by Ms. Mohamed shortly.
Matthew?
Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press. On that topic, besides the attempts to raise funds, I wanted to ask you for Canada's view of whether you said should live up to its responsibility. It seems like for almost 6 years, the UN refused to acknowledge that its peacekeepers had inadvertently brought cholera, causing this. So I wanted to know, can you just say, what is the responsibility that you're referring to? In Canada's view, did the UN more likely than not bring cholera to Haiti, and was not admitting it one of the reasons that money wasn't able to be raised in those 6 years? Because the same issue exists as to Kosovo, where they're basically delaying a payment to people that got lead poisoning in a camp because they refused to acknowledge how they got lead poisoning in the UN camp. So I just wonder if you could address that. And secondarily, the role of the Dominican Republic, which is next door. Recently, the foreign minister of the Dominican Republic met with the Secretary General. We saw his readout. We didn't see the Secretary General's. What is the role of this country, this neighborly country, and what did you find out in terms of that during your visit? Thanks.
So on the issue of cholera, if you look at Canada's contribution over the years of what we've been trying to do is actually trying to help the population affected, try to help the communities affected, make sure that actually when there was risk of outbursts of cholera, that there could be mitigation, and that actually we are working on the sanitation and the water to ensure that infrastructure to ensure that actually we get the proper infrastructure to minimize the risk of future outbreaks of cholera. And this has been our approach all along, and we were there many years ago to actually assist with that. And when the request by the Secretary General was made in the fall, we answered present, and we said, here's what we want to do. We announced additional millions in January that were focused on that kind of approach. On the second question that you've raised, we didn't have any contact with representative of the Dominican Republic while we were there. We've met with the Corps Consulaire in Port-au-Prince, and I don't know the reasons why. It happened that way. The representative of the Dominican Republic was not present at that meeting, so I cannot answer your question.
Sure. Just one follow-up. I mean, I take your first answer to mean that Canada's monetary contribution wasn't impacted by whether the UN acknowledged its responsibility or not, but it seems many people would say that at least some countries were. Or there's a dispute. Maybe you've seen Philip Alston's report saying that this legal hair splitting basically compounded the problem caused. So I just wanted you to, who's supposed to in the UN system tell the Secretariat when it has to make an admission, and did this system, if it exists, break down in this case?
Well, your question is raising very complex issues, and there's no, unfortunately, to your question, there's no one size fits all answer. It's a question of every situation will be unique in that respect, and there's no process you can put in place. That actually answers all of the concern raised by your question. It's a question of the leadership of the United Nations in each case as to actually assess the facts and the situation and make a decision at that time.
Rosalind?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Rosalind Jordan with Al Jazeera English. I wanted to go back to your initial comments about development. In terms of priorities, which is more important once you deal with infrastructure? Is it economic development, including high-tech, education, finance, general manufacturing, rather than tourism? And then as a follow-on to your point about bringing in more international support for this movement into development in Haiti, what is the outreach being done to the Haitian diaspora, particularly here in the United States, that is very interested about the economic development in their homeland? Thank you.
It's a very interesting question. The last question is we have not explored while we were there the relationship between Haiti and the government and the actors, the stakeholders in Haiti with the diaspora. The only thing that we've had many times were discussions about where it came into question was the issue of the importance of the remittance from the diaspora that was assessed at, if I'm not mistaken, at $2 billion a year, which is actually one of the biggest source of financing and investment in Haiti that the Haiti society receives every year. On the issue of what's more important or not, it is, so I want to leave that to the government of Haiti, but I can tell you a few things that surprised me personally when I was there. So and that's a challenge that we will face in the entire world, actually. For future development, what kind of jobs will be available for the people? If you look at every situation where I've been in countries, whether in Western Africa or in East Africa or now in Haiti, what is one of the things that is the most needed is economic development. And when you look at economic development, what is the number one thing that people need is opportunities for their young people. It's jobs. Where will the jobs come from? And that's the challenge that we all face as humanity for the coming 25 years. When we hear the president of the World Bank saying that in the next 15, 25 years, 2/3 of the job in developing countries will have disappeared because of technology and artificial intelligence and so on. You get to Haiti, we saw it with our eyes. We visited an agricultural production, hiring, and where we were, it was only a few dozens people, but if you talked about the La Plaine, where it was, I think it's many hundreds, if not thousands of people that were employed in the fields by various actors. Then we went and visited quite an exceptional industrial center in Port-au-Prince, which was it was a conglomerate owned by the private sector. There was a flour refinement industrial plant attached to a pasta making plant, attached to a packaging business producer, attached to a plastic recycling business. So you had 4 kind of lines of activities in the same industrial center owned by the same family. One thing that is striking and frightening when you go there is the very, very few people needed to actually be involved in the production of these, at least 3 of the 4 lines of activities. Like everything was more or less automated in the pasta business, in the flour side, the refinement side, and in the packaging side. Where there was the most people was actually in the transforming of the plastic to recycle the plastic products. So it was just in front of our eyes to see the difficulties. That's what development, the biggest challenge of development for the future will be job creation. We've used often in the past, labor-intensive, the use of labor-intensive industries to develop some countries. Those jobs are disappearing and will not exist to develop other member states or other countries of the world in the future. And that will be a challenge in Haiti. So when you look at it, I think from my personal point of view, I think the government is right to think about agriculture and tourism. But because these are labor-intensive industries. But then you cannot have tourism without infrastructure. So that's also linked to this to a certain extent. But then there's some. I don't pretend that I know everything after spending 3 days in Haiti, as much as I try to familiarize with myself with Haiti, and that being a Canadian, Quebecer, and Montrealer, I have many friends from Haiti, and I've always been interested in its development. But I'm just saying. From me, that's going to be the challenge, and that's going to be so that's my assessment. If you ask me, one thing that struck me and frightens me, and will be a very difficult thing, it's that. But that I can tell you, I went to Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya, Congo, Sierra Leone, Guinea. And actually, we were in the last year, and this issue of economic development came with the discussion, during discussion with each and every one of these heads of governments or ministers or heads of states. And this is the biggest issue everywhere on the planet. And this is something that I actually believe that the United Nations ought to be the convener on this issue. It is. When people talk about reform of the UN, and when people talk about the relevancy of this institution for the future, this is one place where the UN ought to be relevant in that discussion. in the world and convene the entire world to think about that in a very inclusive way.
Do you have a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
Yes, a very quick follow-up. In that vein, then, should the Haitian government perhaps be looking at promoting development of the trades sector, promoting the education of electricians and plumbers and mechanics and engineers in order to not just build the infrastructure, but maintain it so that whatever its future economy looks like, the plumbing works, the lights are turned on, that there is protection after a major hurricane?
Yes. I mean, yes, this is one of the avenues, and that was raised by the president, actually, in the discussions with him. And but yes, of course it has to do. But yes, that's the answer. Sorry.
In the back.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Honorable Ambassador. About 50,000 Haitian living in the United States, and just yesterday, ABC News reported, according to a top immigration official, that Haiti is stable enough for its citizens to no longer need protection from deportation. So what do you think?
To no longer need protection?
From deportation.
Deportation, yeah. So what do you think after your visit?
This is a story about the U.S. saying that, immigration authorities saying that the Haitians here no longer needed protection from deportation.
Yes, it is.
Because Haiti was stable enough.
I will not comment on the internal affairs of the United States.
Dulcie, then
Yeah.
Carol, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi. I wanted to go back to peacekeeping. So is the peacekeeping summit still on, the annual peacekeeping summit in Vancouver in
Yes.
November?
Yes.
So presumably you'll have to make a decision about UN peacekeeping role by then. That's,
I'm not commenting on this. I think these two events are not linked at all, and we've made our commitments, and we will fulfill the commitments that Canada has made in terms of peacekeeping. It's a question of when and how and all of that.
the two aren't related, you're saying? The two topics of
Well,
whether...
the topics are related. I'm just saying the two events. I'm just saying you're asking me, will the peacekeeping summit will be held, and I'm telling you yes. I'm just saying you're trying to tie the announcement with the holding the summit in Canada. I'm just telling you that's your point of view, but I think they are two different things, very much so.
So you may not have an announcement by this summit.
We will take, I think the Prime Minister's been clear on this, we will take all the time that we need to actually make the right decision on this very important issue. When this is a very important commitment for Canada that will have a lot of long-term, it's a long-term commitment, and we need to take the time needed to make the right decision.
Carol, and then we'll call it a day.
That was actually my question also. I mean, do you not feel that if you're holding the peacekeeping summit, that there would be a measure of embarrassment for Canada if you're still not decided on what you're going to do on peacekeeping?
As I said, I think the commitment, we've made a commitment. The announcement has been made, and it's a question of how we're going to do this, when we're going to do this, where we're going to be doing this. And I think everybody understands that this takes time, and that cannot be. It's not a decision that can be taken lightly.
Great. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur.
Thank you. Merci. Bonne journée tout le monde. Bon.